Frogart Ribbiting. With over a dozen fans, he and his group, the Flycatchers, were the most popular jam band the village of Dingley Dell had ever seen. But where is this frog now? What's up with those toxic berries he's always eating? And how did I craft him? Find out exclusively on Goblin Girl Studio. Alright, to get a real understanding of this frog, you gotta know what he looks like. I'm thinking that the first thing anyone would notice about Frogart would be his warm, relaxed smile. Like, really relaxed. Almost too relaxed? Everyone always says that he's tripping, and I mean, yeah, he has really long legs, but he seems pretty sure-footed to me. Now in his retirement career as a horticulturist, he's always in his frayed and patched up old gardening pants and a big straw hat to keep the sun off. And he's never seen without his big, colorful patchwork gardening jacket with pockets for his tools, seeds, stems, thin little sheets of paper, all that classic gardening stuff. Oh, and I think he might have some kind of eye condition because his eyes are always like super dilated. Now that we have the design, to help me visualize and brainstorm how I'm actually gonna make this frog, I'll be using this video sponsor, Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing and planning creative projects. I think of it as like an amazing digital corkboard that you can pin all your sketches, reference images, notes, and checklists to in a way that actually makes sense of all the creative chaos. I'll give you a little taste of how it works. Milanote is super flexible. You can either start from scratch or choose from over 100 board templates as a starting place. I'm choosing the mood board template because then I can just pop in my main design image, to-do, and shopping lists, and a color palette, and get a good overview of how I'm gonna get this thing done. From there, I can link to other boards where I can fall into all my little crafting rabbit holes and get into the nitty-gritty of planning. A mood board really helps me not get lost on a tangent while making something like this and remember my core vision for the character. The Milanote web clipper extension makes it simple for me to pull in all the inspiration images that I found on Pinterest and elsewhere on the internet, and then I can easily toss in my own images and use the annotation tool to add in quick sketches and notes. Milanote was super helpful for me while planning out the outfit for this character because his outfit has so many elements to keep track of, especially that jacket, so I could gather all the reference that I need to make this patchwork coat, but also keep it in context with the rest of the outfit. I was even able to add links to products that I need to get so that I can remember to order them now and not the exact minute that I need to use them. And finally, I think that most of you know at this point that my partner Jake makes all the music to go along with these little critters, so Milanote's collaboration tool has been really helpful. I can send him an editing link and he can interact and collaborate on a board with me where we share music inspirations, I can make notes about what I'm looking for, and he can send audio clips back to share his progress. So if you're making your own expansive universe of miniature posable critters, their homes, and their drama, or any other creative project, Milanote is free with no time limit, so sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description. Thank you to Milanote for sponsoring this video. Now back to our regular scheduled programming, starting with sculpting this head. Like with any sculpture, the first step is to spend 2 hours working on it, realize it's ugly and heavy, feel the crushing weight of failure, and then completely destroy it. But look what I found underneath. A little mount to build my head on that will slot right into the neck. And that's perfect because I'm making his whole head replaceable so that I can give him all his different facial expressions, like chill, relaxed, unbothered, in his lane, moisturized. To fix the heaviness problem, I'm starting with a big ball of tinfoil on the mount and wrapping it in Sculpey clay. As for the ugliness problem, well, I mean, let's start sculpting and see how it goes. Once I've built up the rough shape of his face, I can cut in some center lines so that I can keep things straight, and then shove in 2 little glass bead eyes. Then I can add his nice, easygoing smile, some happy little cheeks, and I mean, just with that, he's starting to become an actual character. And that character is Kermit, but I was able to recover with the simple addition of eyelids, because, I mean, blinking, Kermit could never. And adding some more anatomical structure to his face and neck also helped him look a little less like a 70-year-old sock puppet. I finally remembered to give him a lower lip, and I made his mouth just slightly open at the front to give the feeling of freezing time in the middle of an expression. And that expression is taking a really long inhale. At this point in my life, I've sculpted a lot of small furry mammals, but no amphibians, so I'm using a lot of photo reference to try to get the details just right. Like this little circle on the side of his head. I have no idea what that's about, but I'm sculpting it. The one thing that reference could not help me with, though, was how do you make a frog look old? because Frogart is one of the older residents of Dingley Dell, and I want you to be able to tell that when you look at him, but I've never looked at a frog and thought, damn, that frog's old, so I'm kind of just guessing and giving him some wrinkles and smile lines around his eyes. After some final details, I was left with a very smooth frog, which is all wrong. So to fix that, I grabbed a toothbrush donated by a viewer and realized it wasn't quite the right frog texture, so it was time to try something new. I made a little corn dog of clay, poked it 1,000 times with my professional poker tool, then baked it to make a texture roller. I rolled that dog all over this frog's head and neck to get a nice, subtle frog skin texture, which made a good foundation for finishing up his wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. I loved adding these wrinkles on him, it just makes him look even happier and sweeter. But he still wasn't lumpy enough, so I made a second, bumpier corn dog and rolled that over the back of his head and neck for some added lumpiness. He got a little baked for a bit, and then his head was done. I mean, he looks really chill, but that has to come from inside, right? Like in your skeleton? So let's make him an armature. Which is basically like the little wire skeleton for this frog that's gonna make him strong, but also flexible enough to avoid giving me any straight answers. First, he starts with a few strands of armature wire and copper wire cut to the lengths of the legs, arms, and spine of a completely scale-accurate American bullfrog. Those get lashed together with thread. I'm getting a lot better at not cutting myself on the jagged wire edges while I do this now, and then bent into shape. This is the shape of the arms, you can tell because it's an M for arms. Or is it a W for worms? Those all get tied together with string, and because that's not good enough, stuck together with super glue and baking soda, and because that's not good enough, locked together with 2-part plumber's epoxy. I try to make these roughly into the shape of a frog's pelvis and rib cage. It turns out that frogs don't actually have a rib cage, but they also don't wear clothes, so I think we're in the clear. Now that the epoxy putty is set, I take this interlocking brass tube, cut it into bite-sized pieces, then use liquid epoxy to glue it on to the ends of the wires as a mount for the aforementioned head sculpt and pre-forementioned replaceable hands and feet. With that, his little armature is ready for foam. Foam helps his body have some shape beyond just skeletal nightmare, but still stay flexible. Well, except for the firm foam that goes on his arms and legs to help him be less flexible. But overall, it's about gaining shape while retaining as much flexibility as possible. A bunch of couch cushion foam gets stuck on him with barge glue until he himself becomes a very uncomfortable couch, and then trimmed down until he becomes a frog again. This process is not too dissimilar to carving a marble statue, other than that it's very easy and forgiving, can be done at home with very little equipment, was never done by the old masters, involves no rocks whatsoever, and if you miss a spot where his butt should be, you can always just glue more foam on to try again, because a frog butt seems like a very important anatomical detail. And the body shape is looking pretty good, but he's a little stubby, so let's make this frog some appendages. Posable hands and feet both begin the same way, with an armature. I start with 3 wires folded in half and wrapped together. Then the hands get splayed out into 4 individual digits because frogs actually have just 4 fingers on their front feet hand things. I actually checked this time. And those get trimmed down to size. The end is looped over for what is gonna be a bulbous little fingertip. For the back feet, I also splayed out 4 wires because frogs have 5 toes on their back feet and I wanted to be antagonistic. And then I trimmed them down and looped the ends up for equally bulbous toe tips. I'm gluing some T-nuts between his toes with super glue and baking soda because I want to be able to screw him down into a diorama of his big greenhouse once I get around to making a diorama of his big greenhouse. To get these limbs to attach to the body, I endure a little more of this horrible sawing sound, and then glue these interlocking brass tube pieces to the end wires of all the appendages. That leaves us with a small army of arms and legs that need to get foamed. For the meat of the hands, I'm using more of this cushion foam that I stole from your couch and some special effects balloon latex. I cut out little pieces of foam for the top and bottom of each appendage, saturate them with latex, and then fuse them together around the palms and feet wires, imprisoning them forever. Then I repeat the process for the fingers and toes. At this point, they're kind of giving dehydrated frog with a sombrero, so after a quick trim of excess foam, I'm adding more foam back onto the palms, knuckles, heels, and bulbous bits, then cut foam off for the footholes, then add more back on for the toe webbing, which is definitely my favorite part of these feet. They're gonna be so cute. Finally, we're ready to put some skin on these things. I fill my jar with balloon latex, then tint it with green, brown, and yellow acrylic paint to get a light snot green color. I promise it's gonna be a classic snot green color when it dries. From there, I just dip the appendages into this snot soup to get an even coating of latex, helping any excess get out of the crevices, like between the fingers or in the webbing or in this gaping hole. I let them dry for a bit and then just do it all over again and again and again until I can get a mostly consistent color. The footholes get a little bit of surgery to clear away all the excess latex that got caught in there, and now we have some finished posable little hands and feet. I'm so excited to play around with these. And now let's paint his face to match his little green hands. Frogart is a pretty strange critter, really different from a lot of the critters of Dingley Dell. I don't know if you know this, but frogs don't have fur. Like at all. Normally, I can just do a rough paint job, trust that the fur will cover it, and it'll be fine. But this time, I actually have to do a good job. But I mean, come on. You don't want to hear someone talk about how a craft is done. You want to hear about Frogart, so let me tell you about him. After the mysterious and acrimonious breakup of the flycatchers at the height of their fame, Frogart has transitioned into a retirement of playing the washtub bass just for fun and focusing on his second career as the village's horticulturist. But he doesn't seem to be a particularly useful one because everything he grows is mildly toxic. I mean, you would think that would stress him out, but he always leaves his greenhouse looking super relaxed. The other residents of Dingley Dell emphatically warn me not to try any of the berries that he grows and keeps trying to offer to me, but I feel so rude to say no. I mean, what do you think? Should I eat one? Just to be nice? Frogart is super imaginative and good at coming up with all kinds of fun and weird ideas for town events, home decor, business ventures, and really cool washtub bass riffs, but execution is not quite his strength. That's where his fiancée, Totalmeyer, comes in. This also may explain why, at this point, he and Totalmeyer have been engaged way longer than they were ever dating. I mean, they'd like to get married, but Frogart just keeps getting better and better wedding ideas, and by the time Totalmeyer has stressed himself out trying to make one of them happen, Frogart's already forgotten all about it and moved on to the next. When asked if he and Totalmeyer will ever get married after all this time, Frogart merely responds that time is an illusion and so is the self. And also gravity. So, despite saying totally out-of-pocket stuff like that, Frogart is actually very friendly and charming, which may lead you to believe that he's an extrovert, but he can't keep that up for long. After about half an hour of interaction, Frogart will need to lie on the ground and practice being dead for up to 6 hours. But he can't do that just yet because I need to finish up this paint job. I spray it with some semi-gloss clear paint to give it just a kiss of that mucusy look, and then I use Sculpey glaze to coat his big, dilated eyes and make them extra glassy. Oh, he's so cute and sweet. It almost makes me glad that frogs don't have fur. Contrary to what some of the furrier critters of Dingley Dell might try to tell you, he is not a nudist. So let's make him some clothes. Okay, so not to body shame this frog, but he's got some pretty weird proportions, like no shoulders, a nearly non-existent butt. So to help me make a pattern, I'm using one of the classic pattern making techniques of the old masters, wrapping him in cellophane and painter's tape. I draw in the lines for where I think the seam should go based on my couple years of experience of wearing clothes, then cut it off of him. I trace those pieces out on a sheet of paper, add in a seam allowance, and now I have a pattern. That gets cut out of the nice fabric and sewn up until I have a pair of cute, nearly buttless pants. I use the same technique to make his shirt, well, baby onesie, because I'm tired of always having to tuck these critters' shirts back into their pants for them. If they're gonna act like babies, they're gonna dress like babies. I make a little slit at the front of his shirt to give him as low of a V as I can without showing the seam where his head meets his neck, and then glue and fold over the edges to make them nice and crisp. The top edge of his shirt is hemmed with glue, don't worry, the red pen vanishes when it's ironed, and then baby gets sewn into his little baby onesie by hand. I tried pulling his pants up over the top of that, but I think he's gonna need suspenders to keep them on. So to make some, I cut 3 little suspender loops out of leather scraps and sew them in with these teeny tiny adorable buttons. The straps themselves get cut out of paper, then stuck onto a piece of fabric so I can fold over and glue the edges for nice crisp lines. Those get strung through the leather loops, cut to size, and then sewed down. And it's hitting me now that suspenders are an article of clothing that requires shoulders, so I don't know how much these are gonna help him, but they're cute, so it was worth it. But I'm worried that he maybe looks a little too dapper, so let's give him a patch on his knee to really evoke that rough and tumble life of a gardener. Now that leaves us with the jacket. So Frogart's got this patchwork coat, right? But he's a pretty eclectic, colorful guy, so of course all the patches are gonna be made out of tie-dye, cyanotype, crochet, you name it. But that's okay, because tiny tie-dye is the kind of thing I live for. It's so cute and dumb. First, I take wet scraps of fabric and tie them up with string in their special folds. There's the classic bullseye, the accordion, the itajime, and of course, my favorite and yours, the classic tie-dye swirl. I turned a broken sewing needle into a mini fork to swirl this fabric like a plate of spaghetti until it was all ready to eat. Or, well, get tied into quarters with string. Then they all get dyed with this kind of limited rainbow palette of orange, yellow, green, and purple. After a few hours of getting baked out in the sun, it's time to cut them open and see how they turned out.
Whoa! Mini swirl! It turned out so good!
Yeah, it's a swirl!
Oh, hell yeah!
If you don't like tie-dye, Frogart says that eating some of his mildly toxic berries will really change your mind. And now for the cyanotype patches. This is a technique where you coat a piece of fabric with these photosensitive chemicals. You take it outside, quickly throw some bio-waste on it, in this case flowers, and then everything the light touches will be exposed. Meaning when you wash it out afterwards, anything that was in the sun stays this pretty blue, and anything that was in the shadow becomes white. This was my first time trying this, and it was such a cool effect. I love all the definition you can see on these little flowers. The rest of the patches were all just kind of sentimental, like fabric scraps from this old, cheaply made, mass-marketed shirt that I got at a major retailer, and these now ripped pants that Jake got at a store that sells crystals and pewter wizards. With all my materials gathered, I could finally start piecing this thing together using glue to stick the patches down to a piece of fabric cut into the shape of my jacket pattern, and a blanket stitch to make it look like I didn't use glue. And since all of you over on Patreon are the ones who encouraged me to do the most time-consuming version of this jacket, now would be the perfect time to say thank you. Especially to my honorary Dingley-Dellians, Brave Little Toaster, Figgy Starship, Shark in Hats, Ian Howell, Winda Moratilier, Robert Harris, Cynthia Train Studio Thread Follower, Straight Up Sephiroth, Jacob, Miss Murdy's Menagerie, Nariana Fritsch, Judy Lynn, Becky Kropitis, and Anubix. And my newest toothbrush donors, Llewellyn and her dad, The Amazing Red Dingo, Linny, France Van Rentergem, Everbo, Marissa LaFoon, Scamp Neo Roxy, Holly Cosplay, and Anne in Wonderland. Thank you so much for your support, encouragement, and for being gluttons for my punishment, because patchwork really was the way to go, even though it took me literally 20 hours to make this jacket. Once each piece was covered in patches, I got the very satisfying job of cutting off the excess fabric. And then because I can't help myself, I added in some little flower appliques, sewed on some little flowers made of these buttons and beads, and just a little bit of micro crochet to make these miniature granny square patches because I love them, I can't stop making them. I sew the jacket pieces together at the shoulders, then make the exact same thing, except for skipping pretty much all of the steps, to make a lining. I quilt together some scraps to make a collar, and then all those pieces get sewn together to make a really dramatic shawl. This clothing piece nearly never made it to jacket form because Frogart's lack of shoulders made patterning and sewing on his sleeves so confusing for me, but by measuring once and sewing 5 or 6 times, I eventually got to something passable. The edges all got hemmed with glue and I had a beautiful finished coat. I love it. I kind of want one for myself now. For a little necklace, I initially had something much more intricate planned, but that jacket took all the excessive detail work energy out of me for right now. So for my lazy girl version, I hiked up a distant mountain to find the littlest acorn cap there ever was, then tied some hand-spun polyester string around it, which I then tightly braided into a cord. Then I traveled deep into the mines to excavate a small piece of pink tourmaline and glued it into the acorn cap with my own homebrewed adhesive. And there you go, a cute little pendant. Easy. And it's even removable with a little bead and loop clasp situation in the back. Now for the lazy girl version of making a miniature straw hat. I bought one, but it's a little too tall, so let's drown it in this Tupperware full of water until all the fight goes out of it. Then I just artfully smush the hat until it fits better on his head. But there's a second problem. There's no way to make this thing stay on. But like any good hat maker will tell you, if your hat won't stay on, try surgery. After a quick trepanation to let in the spirits, super glue, and a magnet, I can refill the hole with Magic Sculpt. The spot gets repainted, and it's like it was all just a bad dream. I glued a magnet to his hat, and now he can take his hat off if he goes into a restaurant or ever needs to pat his head and rub his belly at the same time. One last thing, Frogart wouldn't be complete without his washtub base. And I was lucky enough to actually know someone who has one of these that Jake and I could borrow for research. First, you got the titular washtub, which is the resonator for this instrument. I'm fighting all my instincts to make this out of metal because I just really prefer making things out of the materials they're actually made of, which I realize is kind of ridiculous to say after I just made a whole frog out of anything but actual frog. But I'm conceding and making it out of strips of cardstock, which is a lot easier to work with. I could just glue it all together with tacky glue and fill in the seams with some Sculpey glaze. But here's the problem with making something out of cardboard. It looks like cardboard, so I hit it with a couple of coats of clear gloss paint, hoping it would smooth out the texture a bit. Then I painted the whole thing silver. But I wanted this wash tub to look kind of old and used, so I dabbed on some greenish tan over the whole surface, added some orange pops of rust, and there's our little wash tub. I love how the metallic of the silver kind of peeks through all the other colors. Now for the neck, the traditional style is just a freestanding stick that you use to pull the string at different tensions to get different pitches. So let's just do that. This stick gets a notch cut out of it to go over the bottom lip of the wash tub, and a hole drilled through the top for an old guitar string to go through. That gets glued onto the tub, the string gets glued into a hole in the center, and we've got a little wash tub base. No, it does not make music. After all that, Frogart is done, and I can finally find out how is this frog so chill. All Frogart will tell me is if I want answers, eat the berries. I mean, I know everyone told me not to, but what would you do? Wait, is he pretending to be dead right now? Oh no.